Good morning, Dr. Patton, assistant principals, distinguished guests, teachers, and fellow students. I am Cadet Lieutenant Colonel Elizabeth Foley, and I would like to welcome you to our annual 9/11 Remembrance Ceremony. Ladies and gentlemen, please stand for the singing of our beloved national anthem by the Independence High School Choir under the direction of Miss Carolyn Gaham and the presentation of the colors by Indy's Junior ROTC.
Say, can you see by the dawn's early light what so proudly we hailed at the twilight's last gleaming, whose broad stripes and bright stars through the perilous fight o'er the ramparts we were so gallantly streaming, and the rocket's red glare, the bombs bursting in air, gave proof through the night that our flag was still there. Oh, say does that star-spangled banner yet wave o'er the land of the free and the home of the brave?
Colonel T.J. Foley commissioned into the Army as a second lieutenant in December of 1998 at Arkansas State University through Army ROTC. Colonel Foley is a graduate of several professional military schools, to include the United States Army War College, located at Carlisle Barracks, Pennsylvania. His current assignment is the Joint Forces Headquarters, Tennessee Deputy Chief of Staff, G3 Operations. Colonel Foley is a recipient of the Bronze Star Medal and the Master Combat Infantry Badge. He is married to my mother, Mrs. Jackie Foley of Spring Hill, and they have 3 daughters, me and my 2 sisters, Kaylee and Emma Foley. Please join me in welcoming my father, Colonel T.J. Foley.
Good morning, Indy. How we doing? Yeah, it's definitely a Thursday, right? Hey, a couple things before we start. One, thank you to everybody and Jay for inviting me to speak again. Just when you think you've been through a lot of combat and service, I challenge you to drive on 31 to get into this parking lot. Wow. I think half of you don't know what you're doing. The other half think you're race car drivers. So kudos to you guys, and the insurance bills will definitely reflect. Again, Jay, Elizabeth, ladies and gentlemen, I appreciate you guys coming out on this very important day. And I stand humbly before you, and I want to speak about an event that will always go down in our history as one of the worst times, and that is September 11, 2011, or 2001. Yeah, and we all have 5 degrees of separation from Kevin Bacon. As you heard in my bio, I was raised in Arkansas. And if you look into some of the events of that day, there was a stewardess. Her name was Sarah Lowe. Grew up in high school with her. And she was a cheerleader she was on the cheerleading team captain. She was a track athlete, 4-point grade student, and she was also a victim of 9/11. And she came from a town of about, 8,000 people. So if you look across, in any tragedy you find, you're going to find somebody that is tied to something personal. So as you look at, in terms of our, things that shake our nation, you got to remind yourselves of just how fragile our peace is, the strength of unity that we have, and the importance of sacrifice and commitment. If you look at the events of that day, it's easy to compare and contrast those events, the political environment, the social environment, with what we have going on today. And you feel a sense of despair and disillusionment in the face of all of these items. And every one of these threaten to tear our nation apart. So what you have to do is that remind yourself in that face of uncertainty, front post forward, always eyes on the prize, which is finding ourselves and being part of something bigger than ourselves. On that day, we witnessed both the worst and the best of humanity. We saw first responders running into buildings, putting their lives on the line just to save others. You saw strangers helping each other in the streets just to get away from the buildings collapsing in the ash. You saw people of all races, genders, ideologues. They all confronted each other because they were all helping, because they knew this was bigger than themselves. What you didn't see is probably the most important facet of our values, and that was what was going on Flight 93. Of those of you who don't know, Flight 93 went down in a field in Pennsylvania. It was destined, what many people think is that plane was destined to hit either the White House or Congress. Well, they had a different plan on that flight. What they did is they showed us the true meaning of unity, sacrifice. The difference between Flight 93 and guys like me or you sitting here or some of the veterans in here, you're trained to fight in the Army. You're trained to be a part of a team. You suffer together, you work together, and you fight together. You put a group of people in a plane that don't know each other and against an existential threat, and this group decided, we're going to fight back. We're not going to go down. And that's what they did. They gathered their courage, they built a plan, they faced these unbelievable circumstances, and they rose to the occasion, did what was necessary. I remember listening to a documentary later. So back in the day, planes had these phones that had a cord to it, right? I'm dating myself. Now you got Wi-Fi, but they had actually phones you could call your family, and that's what happened. And one of these passengers spent a final moment with his wife where he recited the 23rd Psalm. And for those of you who don't know, the 23rd Psalm is brought comfort to guys like me, Marines, airmen, sailors, before they go out on mission. And it says, "Yea, though I walk through the valley of the shadow of death, I fear no evil. For thou art with me, thy rod and thy staff comfort me." The guy's name was Todd Beamer, and he was the guy that led the charge against those terrorists on that plane. And in that documentary, they talk about his final words. And right before they attacked these terrorists to fight back, he said, "Let's roll." Very simple. And that moniker set the conditions for the future. If you talk to any serviceman before they go into a fight, and I know as a commander, I did the same thing, but right before we'd go across the line of departure, I would come across the net and say, "Let's roll." And what that meant was, we're never going to give up. We're never going to give in, and we're always going to fight. And in the aftermath of 9/11, that's what we did. Our nation's unified very much like that of Pearl Harbor. And these existential threats, they're fleeting. We're good for a time, and then we start to forget. And then we get reminded of just how fragile we are. We were united in grief, but also in our determination to build and move forward. We're reminded that despite our political, our racial, our social differences, we are all Americans, and we need to be treated as such. You know, it's interesting, with the last 24 hours, or actually the last week, has been a very interesting week for our nation. Between school shootings, murders in trains, and an assassination of Charlie Kirk yesterday, we've got some work to do. But I'm positive that seeing the people sitting in this room, our future's bright. So as you look at the things that influence us, you're gonna face challenges, whether it's cultural, socio-economical, or just maybe something at home. Remember, it's all noise. It's all just noise. It doesn't matter. You have to focus on what is close. It's your family, your friends, your network. You need to be the strength for the weak, the light in the darkness, and you need to be the sheepdogs. The sheepdogs are the ones that protect the lambs against the wolves. You know, I spoke on the importance of unity. But unity without commitment and discipline and sacrifice, it's hollow. There's got to be action words attached to everything you do in your life. And I know that we're talking about 9/11, but I'm talking about you. As you grow up, you're going to face all sorts of things. And you got to figure out what fight you're going to fight. And I know that each of you, you're all fighting your own battles. You're fighting tests. You're fighting college. You're fighting, are we going to beat Shelbyville on tomorrow? Remember, your fights can only be won by the way you face your fears. Each of you have to stare them down, and you have to get after it. That's the rules. Hold each other accountable, hold yourself accountable. That's what Flight 93 did. That's what our nation did at that time. You got to understand, you know, the news, the celebrities, social media, they're all echo chambers for the weak. They prey on you. They lack value, they lack empathy, and they distort your reality. You're part of a community. You're part of a nation of individuals who share a common purpose and value, but you all have different destinies. We're unified, I don't want to say y'all, but we're unified by our own values of our fabric, right up there on that flag. People gave their lives for it. Not only just guys like me, but September 11th, there were many that did. And believe it or not, there was lots of kids, your age people, that were part of those flights. So, when you look at your own valleys of the shadows of death, I will tell you from my perspective, I fear nothing, because I know that the young men and women in this room are going to say, let's roll. And that's where I find solace. Flight 93, they faced their moments. They chose to be the rod and staff for others. They chose to be the protectors. And they stood against the darkness. They embodied the spirit of let's roll. So as you navigate through your valleys, remember those, specifically on this day, remember those that gave it all. They gave the ultimate sacrifice. Remember the power of their unity. Remember the promise of the Psalms. Even in the darkest times, you are not alone. Find your strength, find your purpose, and find strength for others. Thank you for taking the time to listen to me. I hope you have a great day, and good luck tomorrow. Cool.
Ladies and gentlemen, we ask that you please stand and remain silent for the playing of taps, followed by the flowers of the forest as we honor and remember those that lost their lives tragically on September 11th, 2001. Ladies and gentlemen, as you go on about your day, we ask that you please keep the families of those lost on September 11th, 2001 in your thoughts and prayers. This concludes our ceremony. Thank you for attending, and God bless America.